This tutorial will show you how to add Prefab's powerful tooling to your Micronaut application. We'll walk through installing Prefab, using dynamic logging, adding context, using targeted logging, feature flags, and evaluating config rules. I'll demonstrate the features of Prefab on Micronaut using this simple application. The application allows you to log in as 3 different users. We have stock user Tony, stock user Joan, and Prefab CEO Jeff Dwyer. Installing Prefab in Micronaut takes 3 steps. The first step is to edit your Maven dependencies in your POM XML file. We'll set a property to define the version of Prefab in one place. That's currently 0.3.9. Then we'll include our 3 dependencies. One is the main client dependency. Then we have a logback listener. And then we have a Micronaut specific module to include some context state keeping tools. The second step to using Prefab on Micronaut is to add a factory class so that Prefab will be available through the dependency injection framework. We will provide a Prefab Cloud Client method. This is where you can configure the client options. After configuring the Prefab Cloud Client, we can then provide instances of the feature flag client and the config client based off that Prefab Cloud Client. The config client method is a little different because we'll also be installing our logging filter. We'll annotate the method with the @context annotation so that this method will be called eagerly at startup. The last step to install Prefab is to sign up for a Prefab account. I've already done that, so I will continue through my project and get an API key. So we'll copy this to the clipboard, edit our command line, and restart Micronaut. When the logs come up, we can see Prefab has successfully initialized. We don't have any configs yet, so there's nothing to load. Now let's take a look at dynamic log levels. You can see our home controller has some example log statements in it, 1 at each level. So when we refresh our application, we will see 3 log lines because logbacks is currently configured with info as its root level. We can get more logging for our home controller by heading over to Prefab. All right, so let's take a look at com.example, home controller, and set this to debug. Just about immediately, we can see we have a new log level that has been pushed to our application. And refreshing the page, now we have all 4 log levels, including the debug message. Prefab gets a lot more powerful if we provide it contextual information about what's going on in our application. Prefab's default context store is based on the thread local. That doesn't work in Micronaut, where many threads can interact with a request as it passes through various event queues. Now we'll implement a filter that'll run before every request to insert information into the Prefab context. Here we're going to grab information from the logged in user, like ID, country, email, and put it into a context of type user. That information will now be available to evaluate rules in log levels, feature flags, and configuration from Prefab. Targeted log levels allow us to leverage the Prefab context to fine-tune our log levels. Imagine a particular user is experiencing problems accessing your application. Previously, we could only set log level at the controller level, but that may generate large log spikes, which you don't want to pay for. Instead, we can now target the log levels for home controller like this. Add a targeting rule, set it to debug when the property user.email is Jeff Dwyer, and everybody else will get back to info. So you can save that. Go to our application again. Here's Tony. So we'll refresh the page as Tony. We get info as the lowest level. Now click sign in as Jeff, and now we see all 4 log levels. So there we have it, targeted log levels. Our example application has one of those annoying cookie banners. We can use feature flags based on the contextual information about our users to show this to only the users that need to see it. To do that, we'll add a feature flag. So we'll call our flag GDPR.banner, true to be the default value, and then we'll add a rule to hide it when the user's country is the US. Save and publish. So now we can see the bar is there for Joan. We log in for Jeff, and that annoying cookie banner is gone. The code changes to hide that banner are pretty simple. First, we'll edit the home controller and inject a feature flag client. Next, we can evaluate the feature flag rule, GDPR.banner. Next, we'll add a line to use the feature flag client to evaluate that rule. The feature flag client will use the contextual information we added earlier. We'll put the result of the feature flag evaluation into the template here. And then the view will evaluate that template data when rendering the page. Now we've updated the page one more time. We have a table showing all available configuration data from Prefab. We have not just the value evaluated as the current logged in user, but also the default value. Let's take a look at how we did that. To evaluate all the configurations without the user context we've added, we can use the Prefab context helper to temporarily override that context with an empty context, and then call config-client.getAll. To simplify the view code, we added two helper methods here. Prefab coerce to string is simply a method to transform the value of the config rule into a string. Prefab evaluate and coerce to string evaluates the config and then coerces it to a string. Now in the view, we simply iterate over each of the configs we put to the template. We output the key, we output the value, we reevaluate it in the user context, and then we emit the type. You've seen how easy it is to integrate Prefab into a Micronaut app. With these features, you can take control of your app like never before. Visit us at prefab.cloud to get started today.